Hey all, here are OS Reviews. So a while back we checked out an interesting desk gadget called the Divoom Pixel Art Displays, and they have the ability to show any animation, time, they can even sync with the internet. So this all belongs as part of the category of interesting desk/office gadgets that you can use to decorate a room with. And today we're taking a look at yet another product that I think fits into that bucket. This one's called Geekmem, and really it's a photo frame, but it has been disassembled using parts from an iOS device or any other classic smartphone or even Nintendo products from the past 2 decades or so. And you can see all the parts which are taken out, and you can get a clearer sense of everything that has gone into the construction of this iPhone, especially as a tech and phone enthusiast. So you can take a look at this. All the parts are labeled, including the sensors, the cameras, and it's basically encased in a pretty classy looking frame. So the idea and premise is pretty simple, but it still doesn't take away from the fact that it looks quite cool. Pricing is all rather similar, which is going to be around $100 to $140, which admittedly is a little bit expensive, I think, in terms of the parts. If you technically have one of these devices lying around, you can use it as a project yourself to kind of disassemble and put it together, but obviously part of this is because of the labor as well as presentation, since they've gone ahead and done all of it for you, and it looks pretty professional, as well as it's presented in a kind of gift-like packaging. And when we lift it up, which is a magnetic door, we have another kind of tag on the inside which says Geekmem. Pull on the string here on the bottom, and that basically just pops everything out. And before we open up the almost gift-like packaging here, we can take a quick look at what's inside of this paper. So in here there's actually nothing. So maybe they could have tucked a warranty or some type of thank you card in there. Floppy disk as the design here for their logo. And now let's simply slide it out. So we'll take a closer look, of course, at the design here in a moment. I'll mention that, of course, like any decor product, it's going to be very subjective in terms of if you like it or not. Of course, some folks would prefer something like a regular photo frame or a painting. But I think for our particular community, since, again, we are all interested in tech products, consumer electronics, and how that has almost shaped our lives, I do think that this is still a kind of interesting idea. So immediately I am observing that there might be a few maybe slightly rougher edges here. That's just a part of maybe shipping. So we are going to give it a bit of a wipe, and I think most of this residue that is kind of a bit dusty will come off. And it does look very cool here in person. A few other observations being that what I originally assumed was regular or tempered glass is actually more of a plexiglass. It has some characteristics of plastic, so it is going to be a bit more resistant to cracking, for example. And I think that makes sense because it will prevent it from getting damaged in shipping. And overall, it still looks glossy and very clean. The frame's color, which is again made out of real wood, is also painted to be maybe a little bit lighter than I was thinking. It's a little hard to show here on camera, but I would say the color in person is a little closer to being a very dark brown. And then obviously we have the iPhone 5 version here, which I do also think is pretty cool, since the iPhone 5 is regarded by many as one of the more beautiful designs in the current iPhone history to date, even though maybe the original iPhone or the iPhone 4 might have been slightly more iconic and historical. Still, we can zoom on in and see all the parts which have been labeled for us, including a quote here by Steve Jobs that says, if you do something and it turns out pretty good, then you should go do something else wonderful, not dwell on it for too long, just figure out what's next. And then everything here has been put together using, it looks like, a combination of glue as well as these very small micro screws in terms of how they're labeled and assembled. The speaker, also even the SIM card tray, as well as the Wi-Fi antenna, the volume control, even the mute switch, ambient light sensors, front cameras, antennas, locks, receivers, cameras, LED light, the CPU, in fact, the A6, which was a dual-core chipset with 1 GB of RAM, can even be seen there with the Apple logo. So all of these parts, again, have been just labeled for us. So if you're also someone that is trying to be more familiar with how various elements of the iPhone are fitting together, if you're trying to get into disassembly, this would also be, I think, a pretty cool display piece. Condition of all the parts they've used, of course, does look quite good. You can see a bit of reflection that's just part of the plexiglass when we were wiping it, but indeed the condition of the actual product looks very pristine and refurbished, so there's no real scratches or dents or anything like that, and all the text is legible and looks quite good. Crazy to see how all of these tiny little parts can make up such a powerful and impressive device that we are all more or less obsessed over and controls our digital lives. Now, in terms of the frame, one thing I will mention is painting of the veneer and some of the small edges and corners. Maybe they can still work on refining a little bit more. Like this particular corner, technically it has been painted, but the color of the paint is just a little bit lighter than on the outside of the frame, which I would honestly prefer if it's all one consistent shade, which would be darker. And that maybe looks a little bit more weathered, but perhaps that's the look they're going for. And on the back here, we can see it doesn't have any paint, so the actual wood is a lighter color. And we also have the ability to see a kickstand here. So you can also pop it upwards just by displaying it onto a desk, for example, if you don't want to necessarily hang it onto the wall. Although it's worth mentioning that if you want to hang it onto the wall, there aren't really any traditional cutouts by default that has that photo frame kind of etch, but you can obviously do that yourself. As it is, it might be most easily used as a desk stand, and then it just pops upwards. It can be used at a few different angles, and you can try adjusting it back, and it holds and supports the weight without really any problems. This type of project is also quite cool because in a way it really is also recycling, kind of helps reduce landfill and e-waste, since all these things can be kind of reused for projects like this, which is going to be more eco-friendly. So not only does it look cool, but in a way it also preserves things like this from just getting dumped out or turning up in landfills. So that's more or less it as far as our hands-on look of the Geekmem art frame series, and in particular I think again this is a pretty interesting idea, whether it's as a project or something you want to pick up yourself just to both showcase tech if you are a geek or tech lover, in addition to just repurposing and reusing older electronics in general is always a good idea. You can check out more details in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews.